Thank you all for joining us tonight. I need a motion to adjourn exec and re-enter. Okay, Bill is and then second, and all in favor. We need to do that.
Who's second?
The second was
Barry.
Barry. Okay, and now please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have exits right here and two at the back, two at the sides in case of emergency. Please make your way quietly and calmly to one of the exits. And as always, this building and all of our buildings are smoke-free. So that brings us to the Board of Education meeting minutes of October 15th, 2018. It is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education approve the minutes of October 15th, 2018. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Tom, in a second. Second. Barry, all in favor? Thank you. We have several FYIs tonight. We have an FYI for budget appropriation reports for general, school lunch, and special aid funds as of 10/31/18. We have an FYI of budget transfers. Also, one for extracurricular quarterly reports as of September 30th, 2018. And finally, one for the revenue status report as of 10/31/18. And that brings us to the treasurer's report of September 2018. It is upon recommendation from the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education approve the September 2018 treasurer's report. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Okay, Bill and Xavier, second. All in favor? Okay, that is everyone. Thank you. And finally, the warrants. It is upon recommendation from the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education approve the attached warrants, which were certified for payment on October 24th, 2018 and November 7th, 2018. Can I get a motion? Linda, and a second. Christine, all in favor? Thank you. Okay. We haven't been together in a while, so I imagine that there are several board members who have communications and announcements, and I'm going to open it up to my fellow trustees. Anyone?
I'll go first. I rarely make announcements. I had the privilege and pleasure of attending the robotics fundraiser. And I got to tell you, just impressive is the only word I could really use that does it. Between the event, the students, all the work they've done, and the turnout that they got there, and the amount of money that they were able to put in the bank in one evening, every one of those is aptly described as impressive. So I was, the students were great, good event, good, and, again, they still have more to go. But,
and that launch pad is someplace too, isn't that space fantastic?
But it was a really nice night. I was very, very pleased that I went.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else down there? I know.
Sure. I'd like to congratulate the Huntington High School Drama Club on their
Awesome.
amazing performance in the desk set. I did not know they were that funny. I know those kids pretty well, and I didn't know they were that
It was
funny.
surprisingly funny. I agree.
Yes,
it was
surpri-
excellent.
It was very fun. And then you're going to talk about the board convention?
You
I'll
guys
leave it
can
to you.
mention
It's
it.
okay.
Actually, go ahead, because we were all there. Talk about it.
No, I'll leave it for you.
All right. All right. Xavier, you have anything for us tonight?
I'm going to tell you that the mock trial team is in full session. We actually got the problem by surprise yesterday. So we've been practicing, we've been going at it. It's an exciting season. We've got a lot of ninth graders, which was pretty amazing. So I'm looking forward to a great year.
Super.
And I just wanted to thank everyone who attended the Booster Club fundraiser last Wednesday night at Crest Hollow. It went off really well. It was a great success. Patty Weber, who put the whole event together with the rest of the Booster Board, helped. She did an amazing job, raised good money, and
It's a really
Georgia
fun event.
McCarthy is the honoree. She brought in a lot of people, and everybody had a great time. So thanks to everyone who was part of that and came and enjoyed.
Thank you. How about this side of the table? Anything over here? All right, well, I have a couple things. First thing I want to talk about is that the New York State Band competition took place in Syracuse the last weekend in October. My youngest son happens to be in the marching band, so I was well aware of the kind of hard work and dedication that those students put in, and I'm so glad to say that they were rewarded for that by placing second in their division, and so I just want to say a big congratulations and shout out to the Blue Devils Marching Band. I think they're tremendous. And finally, I will mention that several of us went to the NISBA, that's New York State School Board Association Convention Conference, I should say, in New York City. There are workshops that you can attend. You get to pick, different workshops at different time slots, and they're often different school districts in New York State who have tried something innovative or who have had great success putting in a new strategy of some kind, and it's always informative and always interesting, and it was a really nice day for all of us that went. I thought we got a lot out of it this time. And that's all I have to say, and I think that brings us to you, Mr. Superintendent.
That's your story and you're sticking to it?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Few things. First of all, on the state level, if you haven't been following the APPR saga, it looks like at this point the Board of Regents is set to extend that moratorium for another year through June 2020. What that means is the decoupling of state assessment results and teacher/principal evaluations is going to continue for at least another year. And now with the outcome of the elections last week, majority flipped in the New York State Senate, it looks like there's going to be even more pressure to change that APPR program altogether, and also some pushback against some of the regulations that are attached to the Every Student Succeeds Act. So we're following that very closely. Obviously, accountability is something that impacts every district, but it's something that we've got to collectively look at as not only a district, but as a state collection of school districts. I had mentioned in passing to some board members regarding financial conditions for the 2019-20 budget development process, and it looks like the CPIU at this point through September, I don't have the October update yet, it looks like we'll be at 2% or above, which would be our start point. It also looks like the teacher retirement system employer contribution rate for next year, based on next year's payroll, is going to be in the 8.5 to 9.5% range, which is a decrease from the current school year, which is a positive. However, the one downside and the caveat here is that rate is determined in part by a 5-year average of rate of return, and the number that's set to fall off the table, the 13-14 return of 18.2%, once that falls off, surely that will contribute to positive pressure. I shouldn't say positive, to increasing pressure, meaning that it looks like that rate is going to increase for 2020, 2021. So we're watching that very carefully. It does tend to average out over the long haul, but facing a decline this year and then potentially a major increase for the following year would be detrimental. And I also just found out today that the school district's tax-based growth factor is lower than it has been for some time at 1.0013, and that is a factor that we watch very carefully as a major component of the tax levy limit calculation. January presentation, but it looks like some of these factors are going to be interacting and negating each other. And as I mentioned, we do have some carryover available for use as well. It remains to be seen exactly how these factors will play against or toward each other. Thank you to legislators on all sides of the equation here. We have a $300,000 grant from Senator Marcelino that will contribute to the press box replacement, and also to the maker spaces in elementary schools, primary schools, and the innovation lab in this building, and the additional $50,000 from Steve Stern that'll be used to enhance and upgrade the high school library, which would round out the grant that had already been received. And we're also, the last set of Regents meetings earlier this month, they started to discuss their legislative priorities and what they're looking for in terms of state aid, and I imagine that the governor will look at what the Regents have produced and historically what has happened when he puts out his initial executive budget proposal in a couple of months. Jen mentioned the Blue Devil Marching Band. Also want to recognize Huntington as the home of 10 students who have achieved all county music honors. They will be participating in a concert very shortly. One may have been held already. Connecticut. We have another upcoming at Half Hollow Hills East, but we have 10 students, which is significant representation for any school district. I'd also like to congratulate Madison Buckholtz as the October Scholar Artist, acknowledged by both the Long Island Arts Alliance and Newsday. There are 20 of them island-wide, and she is one of them. Congratulations to her. And Sam Roberts and Sarah Frawley, on a different note, they presented at a national conference. These are terrific science research students who are aligned with the Huntington Breast Cancer Action Coalition. They have also, just in today, they will be invited to Town Hall to be honored and recognized by the town board on November 20th at 7 p.m. for the work that they have done nationally. It's some cutting-edge work. Very proud of what they've done, and they should be proud of themselves as well.
You put that date in the update?
I will. It just came in today. I'm going to put it in tomorrow's update for sure. I think everything else was mentioned. Thank you again for a terrific homecoming weekend. College awareness and application weeks. Thank you to Kitty Klein and the counselors for some terrific activities at both the middle and high schools, and this is also trickling now down into the elementary buildings, and all of our students, regardless of background, are getting a sense of what college is all about and what opportunities lay ahead for them. All buildings are involved in family connection nights. The concept of homework has been a source of much debate across school districts, and although we don't plan to eradicate homework at any point, all the principals have planned, and they coordinate with each other in terms of timing, nights on which no homework is assigned and topics are presented for conversation so that families can gather and talk about things of importance on a social and emotional level. You mentioned NISPA. Thank you to the high school and to the various clubs who participated and contributed to Safe Halloween. Great high school open house on November 1st. Good turnout from both parents and realtors. And I think that's about it in the past. Just an acknowledgement for tomorrow. It's a busy day. We have honor coming our way from the Composite Prototyping Center, which is a place that we have had many research students attend and participate in material science, cutting-edge material science research. We, Bethpage and Syosset, were the first three districts involved and have had a prominent presence every year, so they are honoring the three districts tomorrow. Tomorrow night is the National Honor Society induction at the high school, and this weekend upcoming interesting event, the Robotics Women's Empowerment Symposium, trying to get students from across the district, particularly the young women involved in STEM activities.
Is it open to everybody or just to the female students?
I believe it's open to everybody.
Okay, great. All right, that brings us to our first public commentary. If you're a resident of the district or a parent, student, faculty member, you can come to the mic. You have 3 minutes. You can, at the beginning, we address the items that are on for discussion and action, but if there's time after that, then you can also address other topics, and it's open to anyone. Even better. Okay. That moves us down to items for discussion and action, and the first one would be the 2017-18 External Audit Report. Do you have anything to say about this, or should I just?
I would put it up, make a motion to.
Okay. Okay, it is upon recommendation from the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education accept the external audit report for fiscal year ending 6/30/2018 as prepared by Cullen and Danowski LLC. So I need a motion. I've got a motion down there, Christine, and a second from Tom. Any questions or discussion?
I'll just mention that this was discussed at length at the last audit committee meeting, which immediately preceded the last board meeting, and we could not take action on the same night.
Right.
It's an excellent report
Straightforward.
overall.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Thank you. That would be everyone. Okay, and this goes hand in hand. This is the 2017-18 External Audit Management Letter Corrective Action Plan for fiscal year ending 6/30/18. It is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education approve the attached corrective action plan in response to the external audit conducted by Cullen and Danowski for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Can I get a motion, please?
Motion?
Barry, and a second from Xavier. Anything you want to mention to us here? This is
Very
all
straightforward.
prepared. Everybody got it?
Yeah, I
All
think,
right.
Jen, I just want to say, this is, again, thank you to the administration, Dr. Acker, for, good fiscal management when this is our corrective action
And this is,
letter.
that's all there
It's
is.
a testament to the good work you do, so thank you very
It
much.
is, thank you, that's very well said, Bill, and thank you to the audit committee as well.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a motion and a second, all in favor? Excellent. Okay, moving on to the 2018-19 Reserve Plan. Okay, we'll get a motion in a second, and then you can talk to us about it. It is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education adopt the attached reserve plan updated as of October 2018, based upon auditor-confirmed fiscal year ending 6/30/18 positions. I am looking for a motion.
Motion.
Tom, and a second.
Second?
I got Bill, Tom and Bill. All right, Jim?
It is relatively straightforward. It is an update of prior plans. The structure is generally the same. It goes through every reserve fund that the district has on the books. Closing balance as of June 30th, 17, and the recommended balance, which would be solidified this evening as of 6/30/18. Most significant change, obviously, is the use of $7.1 million in capital reserve monies. That would be from the 2013 capital reserve. We would replace a small piece of that in the 2017 capital reserve. This is the first year in some time that our unassigned fund balance, and that's this, kind of jumping to the end here, is going to fall slightly below the 4% allowance. But not enough to really impact us significantly, but I think it is a testament to the manner in which monies are managed in district, and we are very careful with this plan, and we are abiding by its constraints and by the funding levels that are specifically delineated within. If there are any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Jim? All right, then we have a motion and a second. All in favor? To everyone, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, zipping right through. We have our budget and election timeline for 2019. That seems crazy.
Can't believe it, I know.
Wow.
Didn't we just turn the millennial? So, but okay. It is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education adopt the 2019 budget election timeline that is outlined below. I know we all had a chance to look at this. Let's get a motion. Can I get a motion?
Motion?
Barry in a second.
I'll second.
Linda. And then, does anybody have anything, any
Just a
questions?
little later than it normally is, right? Or not really?
Pretty much in line. It depends on how the days of the week fall,
Right.
but this is just it's adapted to the 2019,
Falling in the same
2018,
weeks,
19
probably.
calendar. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Works for me, I can open the polls this time if you
So
want.
dates in terms of where certain things fall, like the budget hearing, it's got to fall within a certain window of time. So this is all aligned with what requirements dictate for us.
Good. Anybody else? All right, we had a motion and a second. All in favor? Everybody, thank you. Okay, we've got some board policies. So this is board policy 5551, allocation of Title I, Part A funds in the district. You don't need me to read that. This is a new policy or anything right down there, right? Yeah, okay. It is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education issue final second read approval of new policy 5551, allocation of Title I, Part A funds in the district. Can I get a motion, please?
Motion?
Barry, and a second. Tom, would you like to give us any wisdom?
Again, we've gone through this policy committee and at the last meeting. The only somewhat undeveloped point here is an allocation methodology, because we are still waiting for some additional guidance from the state, but we do have a methodology in place that allows us to supplement and not supplant.
Okay.
So we have a lot of people who are very well versed in Title I requirements: Nancy Allard, Diana Rich,
Gratefully.
Beth. They do a great job with this.
Thank you to them. All right, did anybody else have anything, any comments or questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? That is everyone. Tom, you're up in the air, right? You got it. Okay. Board Policy 7136, Education of Students in Foster Care. It is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education issue final first read approval of Policy 7136, Education of Students in Foster Care. So I'm going to ask for a motion. A motion, please?
I'll make the
Linda,
motion.
and a second. I've got Christine. anything?
Isn't this the second read?
This is the second read also.
Yeah.
Both of these were
It just said
presented
first
as-
read in the.
Oh, it's funny, it was written first read, but okay, so let's amend that this is, the recommendation from the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education issue final second read approval of policy 7136, education of students
Refresh
in
your
foster
screen,
care.
please. You'll see.
Oh,
Oh, yeah? Okay.
oh, well, all right. So do I have to motion and second again?
Nope.
Okay, so anybody have any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor? Thank you, it's everybody. All right, that brings us to a couple things that I'm really interested in hearing about. And the first one is the presentation about the Rave Panic Button application.
The Rave Panic Button application is something that the county executive and the county executive staff, they applied for a grant. That grant was funded and has allowed this application basically to be distributed at no cost to districts across the county, and I believe Nassau is a little bit ahead with this. What it does is it provides a one-touch response to lots of different types of emergencies. And what I'm going to do today is show something I showed to the administration, which provides just a basic overview of how quickly this can be used to call 911, to alert emergency staff to a fire, to a medical crisis, and God forbid, to an active shooter. So this is something that some districts have adopted already. I think we're more toward the front end of this than the back end, but we are also working with and questioning very deeply some of the districts that are a little bit further ahead than we are, that have implemented the system with all the geofences that exist, meaning separating pieces of the campus into areas that can be specifically pinpointed.
Anybody on Long Island?
Oh, yeah. We've been talking to the Kings Park School District. We've been talking to the Riverhead School District. They're a lot in the same stage that we are in terms of evaluating and adopting. There was an administrative council meeting a couple of Fridays back where we did present this to the administrators. It really is, it's a no-brainer. It would be presented to the staff down the road after providing them with adequate information on a voluntary basis. So it does not take away from the communication systems that are already in place. It would only augment them. But this is, I know at the county level, they have a special screen panel designed to respond to anything that comes from this application very, very promptly. And this is in response to some of the major episodes that have taken place nationwide that are beyond tragic and senseless. So what I'm going to ask Kathy to do is just hit the button. It'll give you a 5-minute overview of what the application is all about.
When an emergency strikes, seconds and minutes can mean the difference between life and death. Every 15 seconds that an active shooter has unrestricted access to more people, he will claim another victim. Or when someone goes into cardiac arrest and their heart stops beating, every 1 minute that passes without the initiation of CPR, there's a 10% decrease in survival. It goes without saying, rapid response is critical to saving lives in an emergency. Schools, businesses, healthcare, and government facilities experience emergencies of all types every day. If an emergency occurs at work, the Rave Panic Button smartphone app quickly connects you to 911 and at the same time sends an alert to your colleagues and any security personnel on campus. The app can be used during any type of crisis situation, such as incidents that require immediate 911 assistance or cases where only facility staff members need to be notified. How does the Rave Panic Button app work? During the initial setup, administrators are chosen for your facility and will enter information about the campus at www.smart911facility.com. They can enter facility details such as buildings, floor plans, and landlines, as well as employee names, email addresses, and mobile phone numbers. Once you've been entered into the system by an administrator, you can then download and register with the app. iPhone users will download from the Apple App Store and Android users from the Google Play Store. In the store, click Search, then type Rave Panic Button in the search bar. Now, let's say that you have downloaded the Rave Panic Button app and an emergency occurs at your facility where 911 needs to be notified. Whether you are calling from an iPhone or an Android, first identify the button option that closest relates to your emergency. Hold the button down for 1.5 seconds to activate the emergency call. Both iPhone and Android users will be prompted to first confirm the emergency call before being connected to 911. For instance, if you activate Panic Button to report an active shooter on campus, the app will immediately connect you to 911 and send an emergency alert to all employees at the same time. However, if you activate the medical emergency button, 911 will be dialed, but only key administrators and staff with medical training will be notified. Now, as you know, not all urgent situations require dialing 911. For instance, let's say a school teacher witnesses a minor injury during recess. The teacher can then choose the Staff Assist feature to only notify the nurse on campus and key administrators. Another example may be if the smoke detector goes off at your facility but turns out to just be a false alarm. Staff Assist can then be used to notify all on-site employees that it is safe to re-enter the building. Now that we've discussed how the Panic Button app can help in an emergency, what are the next steps? Number 1, ensure your employer has your mobile phone number and email address so you will be authorized to register with the app. Number 2, download the Rave Panic Button app, then register your information. Number 3, in the event of an emergency, use the Rave Panic Button app to be connected to 911 and automatically notify others on campus. There are answers to the most commonly asked questions about Rave Panic Button online at www.ravepanicbutton.com, but it's worth addressing a few of them in this video. The first question most commonly asked is it a requirement to download and use the Rave Panic Button app? While most organizations have not required their employees to download the Rave Panic Button app, it is highly recommended that you do. The app provides a faster notification and communication process, which could be life-saving in an emergency. The second question states, do employees have to use the Rave Panic Button app to call 911? While you are encouraged to use the app to make an emergency call, you should contact 911 in the fastest and safest way possible. The third question most commonly asked is, what happens if an individual activates the Rave Panic Button app while off campus? The answer to this question is, your phone will still dial 911, but no emergency notifications will be sent to employees due to your location at the time of the call. And finally, is it worth providing my mobile phone number to my employer if I do not have a phone that can support the Rave Panic Button app, or if I simply do not want to download it? This is a great question. If you do not have the app installed on your phone, you can still receive SMS text and email notifications when there is an incident on your campus that you need to be aware of. Therefore, it is highly recommended that you still provide your contact information to your employer, whether or not you intend to download the app. To learn more about the Rave Panic Button app, go to www.ravepanicbutton.com.
Okay, so that really is designed as the most introductory level presentation
Hey
of
everybody,
the
Something Gadget
application.
Guy here, and lately we've been hearing a lot about the Internet of Things, devices which connect to other devices and give us all kinds of
Is that
cool
computer right there?
new features and capabilities that
Just
we've never
close
had.
YouTube. Thank you. I don't know what it was, and I
Next
don't know if I
meeting.
want to know what it was.
We'll cover that in the next meeting. Right. That's
Lovely.
right.
So I'm sure there are a great deal of questions that we've had a little bit more of a detailed presentation on the application, so we are aware of a little bit more and some of the nuances that go along with it and the behind-the-scenes operation of it. But if there are any basic questions that can be addressed here or certainly can be researched further, this is going to take some time to roll out. And like I said, we'd be among the early adopters if we move forward with it, as I expect we will.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. In other school districts where they have adopted this, was there any resistance from the ATH or other providers there? with
There,
regards to accepting it into their phones?
there really hasn't been, because it would be done, and I think it was alluded to in the video, it would be done on a voluntary basis. So it's not going to take away from any existing communications. It would simply be an option for people to probably receive even more prompt communications, but it would not take away from any other methods through which we communicate with staff. And that Staff Assist would be designed according to specs that we dictate. So it wouldn't be an open-ended text message. It would be more along the lines of templates that would be used in certain situations. If there were fire, if there were stranger in the building that shouldn't be there, if there were a medical emergency on the field, and you can actually, I mean, Huntington High School is a big campus, so you don't want to press a button, a medical emergency button, and have an ambulance arrive and not know exactly where to go. So we could actually geofence off the building itself, the football field, the tennis courts, and the fields in between to alert whomever is receiving the message on the other side exactly where that injury lies. And we can do that at any building. We can geofence it any way we want.
So each building would have its own staff assist?
Correct.
Like, it's not going out to the entire district staff, it's building by building?
That's correct. That's correct.
911, they are equipped to, they're all tied into this already on their end?
They are, and my understanding is that they have a 911 call receipt center, and there is actually a panel that's dedicated to this application
great.
specifically.
Yeah.
And listen, this is it reactive? Yes, but for us, it's proactive. And in light of some of the major incidents across the country, there is real concern about protecting ourselves and our kids and our buildings and our staff as best as we
100%.
possibly can. And this is just one component of that,
Yep.
that protection.
So this grant allows us to get the product?
The grant is actually a county grant. We get the product for free. So once we're actually ready to go right now, we've got our buildings and the maps in the system already. The only thing that is not in there yet are the contacts for the staff members.
Are there future costs for the application or anything down
Not
the
at all.
road? Or?
And how much was the grant?
It's
Do we know,
countywide
or-
grant.
Oh,
Our
okay.
piece of it is just a small piece of
Okay.
that, but we have access to the service and we have access to the mechanics behind it for no cost at all.
It's a positive way of trying to be, like you said, proactive and
Well,
prepared.
In some cases, you've got to react, and this allows us to do it very quickly.
Yeah.
Jim, one more question. Could we just run this by our attorneys to make sure that this application isn't used as a sword against us in the cases where some teachers or administrators don't download it? It would have been readily available to them to prevent some sort of emergency. Maybe this can be used against us in the case where more could have been done.
The attorneys have already endorsed this.
Okay.
There are multiple attorneys that districts use across the county, but there's no downside here. The one thing we definitely would not do, and I don't think we could do, is force anybody to download. Some people wouldn't have the availability to do that based on their operating system or whatever phone system they use. But this would be something that people would, I think, want to participate in, and if not, we certainly would not force them, and we still have our standard means of immediate communication in place already.
Great.
I have
Jim.
one last question, oh, sorry.
Right.
Timeline for inputting then, that's all that's left to do is the contacts. When were you looking to do that?
Well, the administrators have already seen the system, and they have already heard from a gentleman by the name of David Crondup, who represents the New York State chiefs of police who are, I think they've been tasked with rolling this out across the state for that matter. So he came down, he presented, they're chomping at the bit to get as many districts involved with this as possible. And the next logical step would be to get the administrators input into the system so they would have access to start. And we can do that almost instantaneously. And I want to just make sure that everybody's aware that that's the next step. And if anybody did not want to opt in, we would not force them. And from there, we would plan a series of at least portions of faculty meetings to introduce this to faculties from across the district, each district school, so they understood. And there's going to be a lot of questions, and I'm sure the questions are going to be rolling probably through the implementation period. But, again, working from the experiences that a couple of front-running districts have had, we'll make fewer mistakes, and we'll also be able to answer questions a little bit more readily and comprehensively.
Have we been informed how long our usage of this system would be covered by the county grant?
From my understanding that there's very little overhead here, and as long as the system is in place, we would be covered. That doesn't mean that 5 years down the road, the system doesn't become antiquated and disappears, but I don't believe there will be a cost at any time, assuming the system remains in place. So all signs point to it being a very logical thing to move forward with.
Yeah, that sounds great. Anyone else?
Well, I'm just trying to think out the process, right? So let's say it's an emergency situation, right? So you gotta pull your phone out, you gotta open the app, because it's more than likely not open, and then you gotta hit a button, and then you gotta tell it to call 911.
Mhm.
And as they pointed out in the video, obviously, if it's an emergency situation, obviously you just grab your phone and call 911 without going through all those steps.
So one of the benefits that was presented to us is that sometimes when you call 911, it's not an immediate response. If you do it through this app, it is a much more immediate response. So while you could end up during a busy time on 911 hold, for lack of a better term, this will put you right in, especially if you if you use that big red button, that's going right to central command, and it will be responded to immediately.
It's like
So
a priority 911.
it is a priority 911.
Especially if they have a separate panel of people answering just those calls, when you think about it. You know, they know that if that it's coming through that, and it's either a school district or a municipal building or something.
We saw a photo as part of a lengthier presentation that showed what central command looks like and all the panels that are situated that have to be observed and watched pretty much 24/7. There is a very dedicated large panel for this button that is monitored and responded to. Use the word priority, I would call it that as well.
And it's been utilized for how long?
It's relatively new, so districts are using it for the first time this year, or they're implementing it for the first time this year. So there's no district that has been using it for a period of time in Suffolk County. I believe it was rolled out in Nassau last year.
So we don't know about any glitches or anything like that, or?
I don't think there are glitches with the system. It's more about glitches with the procedure through which the system is used in particular districts. And we have spoken with and we have heard from districts that, you know, if you're going to be the first to do this, you're going to make more mistakes than somebody who does it later down the road, but you're also going to be more protected early on than other districts that are going to wait on this. So things can be very easily corrected if there is a setting that's not right, if we want to adjust the geofence, if something is not working procedurally. This is a very user-friendly process in terms of either fixing it on our end or making one phone call and having it fixed on the company end.
Jim, where is this company located? You know,
I don't.
they local?
I know, I just went through the paper with the grant. I don't know.
I know it's centralized in New York through the chiefs of police. I don't know where it produces it is located, but I don't know if we'd need to deal with them at any point regardless. It'll be easy enough to research.
Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you very much.
We'll keep you posted on our
Yeah.
progress with this.
That'd be great. Thank you for the presentation. All right, and that gets us to another great presentation, the restorative practices. I think that Mr. Cusack and Mr. Smith are going to join us, right?
So actually, Mr. Cusack is going to do this. It's going to be an abridged version. The Long Island Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development held its fall conference a couple of weeks ago. And I will mention, even before we get to this, is Huntington was particularly well represented because our assistant superintendent, Ms. Beth McCoy, is the vice president of the organization. We had some terrific presenters from Huntington that are still receiving questions and compliments from those who saw their presentations in real time. So Mr. Cusack and Mr. Smith presented this particular session on restorative practices, which is something that has begun relatively recently, and I'd like them to elaborate on what has been done, successes, and what we may be doing moving forward.
Jim, Framingham, Massachusetts.
Framingham, Massachusetts. That was my first guess.
Sorry, Mr. Cusack.
No problem. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity. So as Mr. Polanski said, we had the honor of presenting at LIASCD this year about a month ago. And the scope of our hour-long workshop was to kind of share some of the details of our first year in working with restorative practices, and that includes youth court and some of the other things that we've been doing. And so we had a group of educators, educational leaders who joined us for that session. And we do have some people coming to visit us actually later this week who are following up to learn a little bit more. They're bringing a team from their district to talk to us a little bit more in depth about it, which is good. So tonight, I'll just very briefly kind of share with you an update as well, and share with you what we shared with other districts. So what we presented at LIASCD was kind of an overview. Now, a little bit over a year ago, I came and presented to this board to share with you some thoughts about how we might utilize restorative practices and a partnership with the Town of Huntington Youth Court, which you approved as part of our disciplinary structure. And so as we've gone forward using that, we've found that there's been a lot of success and a lot of, I think, growth within our school community. So what we did was we talked a little bit about what restorative practices are, because our audience was kind of, from different places in the continuum of an understanding.
Restorative practice.
That sounded like a
Or
squeaky bicycle or something. I'm gonna go with that. We talked a little bit about why we embarked upon this journey, why we felt there was a need to take a hard look at our disciplinary practices and how we might improve them. We talked about how we prepared and set the stage for implementation of this program in Huntington High School. And we talked about what it actually looks like in practice and some of the challenges that we faced and the successes that we came across over the course of the year. So this is a slide actually that I shared with you when we started talking about this, which is the definition of restorative practice. And in I guess what you might say edu-speak is it's a social science that studies how to build social capital and achieve social discipline through participatory learning and decision making. But that's really just a bunch of words. When we drill down into it, what does it actually mean? And it's a philosophy and it's a process. For us, it's really not a canned program. It's something that is a bit of a living and breathing thing that we're working through and kind of navigating as we go. But some of the pieces of it that are important to know about is that when a student breaks a code of conduct, a piece of the code of conduct, there's an acknowledgement that there's a harm that was done to the school community. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a harm that's done to one person, but when someone violates that code, it's a code that everyone's supposed to live by. When you engage in restorative practices, a student needs to kind of acknowledge that's what's happened, and that they are also a part of the community as well. And the goal in restorative practices is to repair the harm that's been done and restore whatever order might have been, I guess, damaged in the process of a violation of the code of conduct. A big shift in restorative practices is that discipline is done with somebody rather than to them. And that is a very significant move away from traditional methods of discipline. When you think of school discipline over decades and decades, you kind of think of a punishment. And this is, it goes beyond punishment, and restoration takes the place of retribution. And that is something that we are striving to do. These are all pieces that we shared with the group at LIASCD. Traditional questions that kind of guided discipline when you talk about discipline from a traditional standpoint: what rule was broken, who broke the rule, and what punishment is warranted. Restorative questions go in a completely different direction and ask questions like who was harmed by the event, what are the needs of all people involved, including the person who did something wrong, and how can all of the parties involved address the needs of the school community and repair whatever harm might have been done. So this is my 23rd year in education. I've spent a good deal of that in administration at this point. Actually, as of a couple of years ago, I've spent more years in administration than I have in the classroom. And so over the course of years, I've found, and I think that our team has found, working in different districts, not just in Huntington, that punitive measures can really divide people and lead to animosity, distrust, and sometimes feelings of rejection, especially when you're talking about a suspension. And behaviors don't necessarily change with traditional discipline. Sometimes they do, but not always. And that's why we were starting to look at different methods of doing this. Of course, when you have somebody who's suspended from school, there are parental concerns. When kids miss school, it creates a further divide between us and parents, where we would really want to be creating more of a team. Traditional discipline can divide people. And so just an overall feeling, the overall feeling was that we needed more tools in the toolbox. There, as you'll see as I go through this, we do utilize some traditional methods as well. In some cases, we couple these restorative methods with traditional methods. But our goal is to move further away from traditional methods of discipline as we go forward. That's what we're planning to do and we're working on. So very briefly, we started by working with the faculty and a group called CAPS. That's short for the Child Abuse Prevention Services. Excuse me. What they were providing to us didn't have anything to do with child abuse, but rather they had gotten some core training from the National Institute for Restorative Practices, and then turnkeyed that to us through a grant. So we did some full faculty sessions with all of our staff, giving an overview of restorative practices. We talked about something called affective questions, which kind of was alluded to in one of the previous slides, where we're starting to ask different kinds of questions of students to think about why things happen and what the effects are. We also did some implicit bias training, which can be uncomfortable at times for anyone to really take a hard look at what biases there might be. Especially, I think, in education, that's a very sensitive area because I would say that we all go into education with the right mindset and for all the right reasons. So to have someone come in and say, we need to look at implicit bias because everybody, to a certain degree, might have a piece of that they need to look at. That's a challenge, and it's also really important work. And so our faculty adopted that, and that was part of the groundwork that we laid. We did some additional training with early adopters, teachers who were really interested in this and wanted to learn more. And we delved into some of what they call circle techniques and some of the best practices involved in restorative practices. A lot of that went beyond just discipline, but rather talked about how to bring kids together as a school community at the classroom level. And then we developed a partnership with Youth Court. And what we did was we went on site to visit Youth Court at the town of Huntington. We took a look at what they were doing and how they were doing it and how students were kind of leading these proceedings. Found it to be very interesting and very impressive. And that's when we brought this idea to the board to ask for that to be adopted as part of our disciplinary practices. So to kind of cut to the chase, what does it look like? What are we doing now? And we do utilize Youth Court in many cases as an alternative to longer-term suspension, and in some cases coupled with shorter-term suspensions if there's something that warrants, I guess, for lack of a better term, a break from school. So again, we're working with a little bit of a hybrid, but Youth Court has been a very essential part of our work with restorative practices. And I'll share with you at the end of the presentation some of the, just very briefly, some of the numbers and how that's impacted suspension rates. We've also adopted something that are, it's called restorative service agreements. And this is for infractions that could be of a lesser type, and I'll give you some examples of how we've used that over the course of the year. As I mentioned, we do have, in some cases, some suspensions in limited use, but we are, again, trying to continue to move in the direction away from traditional methods of discipline. We also use, and I'm sorry for my voice, I'm a little bit under the weather, as you can probably gather, and it's getting annoying, but I'm sorry. We do use student mediation sessions and peer conflict resolution, again, to help try to heal some of those relationships whenever that's necessary. Part of the youth court process and the procedures, students really need to be on board with this. It doesn't work if they don't believe in the process and have a clear understanding that they have a role in it. If a student is not willing to participate in youth court or restorative practices, we certainly can't force them to do that. I will tell you that it is extremely rare that anyone would not want to participate in this, whether it be a parent or a student, because it benefits everybody. A jury of peers has a role in assigning consequences when there is a violation of the code of conduct, and the student really needs to be ready to kind of accept that from their peers. And by peers, I mean of an age group. Usually we don't utilize a jury from within the same school. It is a Town of Huntington youth court. So just to avoid any potential conflict, unless everybody agrees to it, usually the people involved would be from a different district so that kids don't know each other, and there's not, although students are trained extensively in how to participate in this and all of the rules of ethics and confidentiality, sometimes it's better to just keep things separated that way. It is intended for first-time offenders. Usually, if someone goes through youth court and they get in trouble again, it's not necessarily going to be effective. I'll also add that the recidivism rate for kids who have been involved in youth court is nearly zero, which is definitely a positive outcome for us. The way it works is a student does an intake meeting with a parent, an administrator, and the youth court director. Parents really do need to be involved with this, although we've made some exceptions if there are truly extenuating circumstances. Parents are a very important role in this process, and when a trial takes place, they actually are in a position to testify, to tell a little bit about their child, and what the history of whatever situation might be. So what we've found is it kind of draws families a little bit closer together too, because now you're in a position, a real position to advocate and to share in the process. The initiation of the intake happens pretty quickly, depending on the schedule of the director of youth court and the program. But the process can take a little while. It can take a month or more in some cases to complete the process. Students who are assigned to a jury, they undergo a minimum of 10 training sessions. Some of them do this over the summer. Some of them do it during the school year. And they learn about courtroom decorum, confidentiality, ethics, and a lot of the professional nature of a courtroom setting, so that they can provide peers with a really good experience. Students who go to youth court as part of a sanction, they are required to serve on at least one jury, and this is part of the restorative practices where students, after going through the entire process, they step into a different role and they learn about discipline from, I guess, for lack of a better term, the other side of things. And then they work with other students to decide what potential consequences there might be, what sanctions, and how to repair that harm. And we found that to be something that a number of kids have said, I really like this, and they've continued to participate, and they've become, or working to become counselors or judges in the program. and they've found, in some cases, they've found a new friend group within this program that has helped them immensely. And those are some of the testimonials that we got. One of the things that I can't share with you tonight that we shared in a very limited way at LIACD was some interviews with students about their experiences. And they had very positive things to say. Of course, that's something that's, it's very sensitive because parents kind of want to know how we're going to use these testimonials, and we explained that that would just be for that one-time use with LIASCD for the benefit of other districts. And we got that permission. I do have one testimonial tonight that I'll share with you, which is from a parent. I mentioned that juries generally consist of students from other districts, but on occasion there's an agreement that students are comfortable with it being from the same school. Typical violations and sanctions, pretty much the entire code of conduct is something that is under consideration when we talk about youth court. I just put a couple here for example, theft, vandalism, fighting, drug and alcohol offenses, bullying or cyberbullying, disruptions of any kind would be something that we would look to utilize some form of restorative practices. Some of the sanctions that youth court puts together have to do with community service. Often they will try to fashion that based upon a student's interests or their strengths. One of the things that we found very appealing about the program is that the kids who are involved in this really try to learn a little bit more about the student who's involved to find out what their interests are, what their strengths are, and to build confidence through this program. Because sometimes a lack of confidence is at the root of a misbehavior that, it depends on the situation, of course, but that's what they've found to be helpful to the person who is considered the offender. They do serve on jury duty. They may be required to go to peer discussion groups to talk further with peers about certain things. They may be asked to write an essay on a particular concept. To engage in alcohol or drug counseling if that is a presenting issue, or anger management sessions. They might just write a letter of apology to somebody. And sometimes what we found is that when there are behavioral issues, there are also academic issues. And so they look into that as well. Parents sign releases to engage with youth court fully so that they can learn a lot about students and what they need. And so academic tutoring, sometimes peer tutoring, is utilized as well. Speaking of theft, we just stole this right from John Adams High School, where Mr. Smith worked for a time, and they said it was okay. So the restorative service agreements, I actually went to a presentation as we were starting to learn more about restorative practices and how we might want to utilize them. And John Adams did a presentation, and they shared their restorative service agreements. And this is something that we do in-house, and it's generally used for lesser offenses. It often includes a student writing a written reflection about what happened, and that's been instrumental in changing behavior. It might include some student research or an article review, and that has been a key part of our approach to vaping. Vaping is something that all school districts are dealing with right now, and we are too. And I've heard a continuum of disciplinary actions that other districts are using to try to curb vaping behaviors, anywhere from 1 to 5 days out of school suspension. And we have tried to take a different approach where students instead are, we're doing things in school, and they are required to do some research on this very dangerous product. And again, as far as recidivism is concerned, we've had, I want to say about 3 students who, engage in something like this a second time. So that's a good, to us, that's a good return. And it's really helping kids with their health. So just a couple of quick examples of how we might utilize RSAs, or restorative service agreements. And this is what we shared at LISCD. I gave, little names to each of these, but For instance, a student in the science research class was kind of messing around with one of the hermit crabs, thought it was funny. The hermit crab passed away, and we, everyone was very sad about this, and the student himself was, upset. It wasn't intentional. But, as we were talking about, violations of a code of conduct, there's some harm that was done to the school community, even if it's a hermit crab, that's still a part of the school community. And so his RSA was to help the marine biology teacher with the tanks and to learn a little bit more about the marine life that's in there, and actually started to really like this and learn more about it, and continued to help out with the tanks even after that sanction was over. Just decided that it was kind of a cool thing to do. So I think that there was a real learning experience there. A student who kind of thought it was funny to jump into a class while the teacher was instructing the class and made some noise, said something silly, and it was disruptive. That RSA included the student having to write a lesson plan and teach it. And he realized that it's really, really hard to be a teacher. The teacher whose lesson was disrupted was really grateful to have the lesson off so that this student could take her place. And at the end of it all, the student and the teacher, really got to know each other, and that was a very positive thing. And I don't know if the student wants to become a teacher yet or not, but that's a possibility. We had a student who was horsing around in the hallway with a friend during passing, bumped his friend into the elevator, and it bumped the door off the track. So the elevator could not be used for the day. He met one of the students who currently needs the elevator, and we didn't even have to say anything. He immediately offered to go get all of her things from all of her classes to make sure that she had everything that she needed for the rest of the day. And his written reflection definitely made me misty, because he realized that just fooling around had an unintended consequence, and I would say he made up for that mistake in a very important way. I think he learned something from that, and I only have seen him ever since to just say hello. He's never been in trouble again, and that's a good thing. Graduation is a very special time of year. We had a couple of kids who, the night before graduation, thought it was funny to mess around with the chairs that were very carefully put together for graduation. A lot of very unhappy custodial staff and administration, and the students who engaged in this realized pretty quickly it wasn't funny. And in the past, in terms of traditional discipline, there's not much else to go on except for the fact that there's this graduation ceremony. And what do you do with someone who violates the code of conduct and you have no school left? Do you take them out of the graduation ceremony? The answer for us was no. In fact, instead, they agreed to help the custodial staff after graduation, which was a little bit of a leap of faith on our part, because once they graduate, they're no longer under my purview or jurisdiction. They did know that. They did. They were kind of like, okay, sure. They came back for 3 days, full days, and they helped. And they complained a little bit. So the parents were very, very grateful and happy. The grads were kind of sad. But they also learned that it's not that easy to put all these things together, and sometimes we take things for granted. I don't think they will again. Some of the challenges that we face with this is the traditional style question: what did a student get if they did something wrong? And potentially the subsequent question: is that all they got? My answer to that, if that question were to arise, is that they got plenty of learning and plenty of something better than traditional discipline. And once that's all explained, how extensive this program is, and people do know that, but sometimes when you're the recipient of said behavior, it can cloud, your view of it maybe. People have come to understand that, though we've taken some small steps, we've taken some bigger steps, we're trying to get everybody on board with this, and that is in fact happening. Laying the groundwork was a challenge, as I mentioned before. Looking at things like implicit bias, that's a challenge for anyone, I think. And our faculty really did, I think, a very good job of looking inward at that to see, how we might need to shift and change. Things like this restorative circles haven't really taken root, I'll be honest. While systemically we're working on our discipline and the way we do things from a systemic standpoint. At the classroom level, it's difficult because of the content, the pacing, the I guess anxiety to move forward in the curriculum. That it doesn't leave a ton of time for things like restorative circles, where everybody kind of gets together and talks about things that might be on their minds. That is something that I'd like to in the future look at. A number of schools utilize like an advisory period, things like that. That might be something that we look toward in the future. And so, I'm not sure exactly where we want to go with that, but that might be something that we may employ in the future. As far as youth court is concerned, sometimes parent availability can be a challenge. Sometimes students, say that they're going to do something and then they don't necessarily follow through. They do get multiple chances to get things going. And again, it's pretty rare that people don't engage with this. One of the things that we might look toward in the future is the possibility of an in-house youth court where we can train our own kids. That does present some challenges, though. As I mentioned before, we try to keep kids separate from their peers, within the same school. So that would take some thought, but it is something that we might like to look into. The successes that we've seen are really true transformation for quite a number of students. Teachers seeing the power of restoration in stark contrast to traditional methods, a very low recidivism rate, a suspension reduction, and in cases where we look at, we look at the suspension numbers in terms of disproportionality to make sure that we are in alignment with our school population, that the population numbers in some way match suspension numbers. And we've seen that those gaps, wherever there were some, have closed significantly over the course of 1 year. So this is some of the data that it's really quite a bit of data that's boiled down into really 2 slides. But looking from 2014 on to last year, the suspension rate in 2014 was 10.3% of the school population, which to me is relatively high, much higher than I would want it to be. 2015, it went to 8.5%. 2016, before we started using restorative practices, it was 7.3%, and as you can see, last year it was 3.9%. It's not perfect. It's not zero. That's the direction we want to move in, is zero. But it is a significant reduction, and I think that we've seen some gains. In terms of longer-term suspensions, we have seen a 63% reduction in 1 year of the number of days of suspension. And that to me is a very important number, because every day out of school is a day out of school, and that's something we want to get away from. So is there time? I know I've kind of talked a little bit longer than you might have wanted me to. I apologize. But this is about a 4-minute testimonial.
Let's see.
Yeah? Okay. I will. So this is a parent who told us a little bit about her experience, and it takes her a minute or two to get going, but I think you'll find it interesting.
Good morning, and thank you so much for doing this today and for being with us. We're talking about restorative practices and the youth court experience. So can you tell us from the parent's perspective, what was the process like for you? Where did it start? How did you move through the process? What were some of the steps?
Well, my daughter was having some difficulty in school, and she got called in to discuss her experience with some other students who were going to advise. My understanding was that it was a sort of disciplinary, but taken from a very different approach, where it was her peers who were going to discuss her experience, and coming from a place where they were sort of in the same place as her. So, of course I was nervous, we were both very nervous, but when we got there, it was they were very reassuring, they were very friendly, they made her feel very comfortable telling her story, talking about her experience, and they were extremely supportive and really had incredible feedback, and I think she was deeply affected by it.
So what are some of what would you say would be the number one lesson that was that you think was learned through the process?
The number one lesson for her was that she wasn't alone, and that she could talk to other people and reach out, and that she didn't have to carry it all and as a result act out in ways that were not good for her.
Okay. Great. We've noticed significant changes here at the school. What are some of the changes that you've seen?
Well, one of the struggles for my daughter is that she has a learning disability, and for as long as I can remember her, the entirety really of her experience in school was she had this feeling of, I'm stupid and I can't do this, and just sort of a give up, not give up entirely, but give up when it got difficult, when she was struggling, she would sort of throw her hands up and say, I can't do it. But she's clearly not stupid, and she was also very resourceful, so she had started in another program that was more it's called Wilson Tech, and so she was taking a very different route in high school, and this experience sort of confirmed for her that she was really no different than these other students, and that the difference was that they had support, and that they were willing to reach out for help. And so one of the biggest differences is that this year, and it's her senior year, she has opted to take an AP class, which she never saw as an option for her. She is very, very determined to go to college, and she has learned from this experience that she wants to study psychology and the brain and understand why she behaves the way she behaves and thinks and feels the way she feels. And she's done research and learned that she wants to do cognitive neuroscience, and this is, coming from a kid who last year said she was stupid and couldn't do anything. So it was a tremendous change, and I attribute a large portion of it to her experiences with the other students there.
That's amazing. It's so safe to say that this process transcended the disciplinary structure and went into places that we probably wouldn't have even predicted.
Absolutely. She met she met some students with whom she really connected. She immediately started doing a little bit of tutoring with one of them, and she has now elected to go and volunteer to be a member of the youth court. So, yeah, it's a dramatic shift.
That's great. So thank you so much for doing this today. We really appreciate it. I know it's not the most comfortable thing to be on camera and talk about this, but I think that your experience was so significant that other people really needed to hear the story. So thank you so much for doing that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So that kind of tells a lot. And you've seen, and that's just one student, but completely different person. And that's our hope, is that over time, I will never say that we're perfect. But that's our goal, is to continue to move in this direction and move away from traditional methods. Because within restorative practices, there really is restoration. There's healing, there's hope for kids. And we don't use the word love a lot in education necessarily, especially at the high school level. But when you kind of wrap these ideas around kids, they know that you love them, and they are transformed. So I really appreciate the support that we've gotten from the central office and the board as we work through this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cusack.
Questions and comments?
Yes, Brennan, I want to thank you for bringing this program to us. And I think it's an excellent alternative to suspensions. Commend you for the suspensions and the decrease in suspensions to 3.9. I mean, that's incredible. That's a tremendous number. And then you have also a decrease in the cumulative days that they're out. What about the individual amount of days? Is it still, if a kid does something, is it still 5 days or?
Not necessarily. We've looked at, again, in some cases we've used a hybrid. In some cases we've replaced suspension with youth court or with an RSA. For the I'll go back to the vaping example. In the past, smoking in the building, which I don't even know if anybody smokes anymore. It's just vaping. Which is, I don't know which is better really, but that would have been an out-of-school suspension of multiple days, and we don't do that. So we keep them in school, and they work on a short, not something that's overwhelming for them to, it's going to take away from their studies, but they do need to do some research and produce something that shows that they learned a little bit about that. So it's just an example, but there are other situations like that as well. If there's an altercation or something like that, whether it's a verbal altercation or, in knock on wood, but thankfully we don't have too many physical ones, but like any high school, that does happen on occasion. And in some cases, we've just had a cooling off period and then youth court.
Are there ever instances where a first-time offender would get suspended?
First-time offender, no.
Right.
No, we look to, again, in some cases, we might have a suspension with youth court, but, straight suspension with no restorative piece to it, no.
Great, excellent work, thank you.
I have a question. Are you finding more equity among the subgroups now?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that, where we've seen a significant decrease in any gaps between subgroups that there may have been. Those were, and those are things that I talk about with the central office in my goals and whatnot, and produce some of that data as well. But yes, absolutely, that's something that we
do you have a restorative justice plan for the future?
Well, again, some of that, I think, has to do with our looking to see the capacity within ourselves. Right now, we do, and it's an excellent partnership with Town of Huntington, but it can be a challenge because they're working with multiple districts, and it's a relatively small program. So there are times, you know, on occasion where you have to wait a little bit and stagger things, and that can impact our ability, I think, to use this. So going forward, again, it would require and will require some significant thought about how we might make this look within our own student body. But it's definitely something that I would like to see going forward, and I think that that might be the way toward going in that zero direction.
If I could just do one more, I'm sorry. So when we were at the convention, the school board's convention, one of the breakout sessions that I went to was on mental health. And the presenter was very interesting, and I won't get into the specifics yet of what he was doing at his school. He's a very small school. It was different than ours. But in conjunction with restorative justice, to look at, you know, things that you could do with the students and the whole school community before a situation arises. Just some things that I know you already do, but he, you know, just to give examples like yoga and, you know, and mindfulness break and all those kind of things that I know we do in different buildings and different pieces. I didn't know if you had like a dream plan for all things like that.
Yeah, we'd all be meditating and
No, well,
floating.
They do
No,
a 5
absolutely.
minute, seriously, it was like he does 5 minutes, a different period every day of like 5 minutes, where everybody's just quiet, not meditating, it was silence.
We've dabbled with some of that, and last year we had every Wednesday before school
Right.
a mindful session with a couple of different leaders in the building who are skilled at this. And we had some challenges with that because it was too early. You know, I found it sometimes, you know, you're rushing to get things done, and I'm running down to go meditate. And it's like kind of counterintuitive because get there, and oh yeah, now I really need to meditate.
Now you're more stressed out because you lost 10
Some
minutes.
kids did come though. We're in the kind of nation planning stages of our parent academy this year. We definitely want to infuse some of those pieces to it. We may actually be looking in the direction of a family academy more than a parent academy, which might include kids. And part of that will definitely be mental health related and working through anxiety and depression and stress and all of those things that, again, are not just within our school community, but are across the board. So that's definitely something. We actually have someone who's going to be presenting to the faculty in a month on mindful practices that can be turnkeyed. We've done some of that already. And, you know, it's here and there people start to kind of adopt that a little bit. One of our students last year did her science research project on the academic effects of mindful practices in the classroom. And she chose a few classes that were doing like pre-testing, breathing strategies and whatnot, and then took data to see the effects on test scores. And she's trying to expand that this year. And she presented to the faculty also so that teachers could see, wow, this really makes a difference. Even though it was a pretty small data set, when it's coming from kids, I think it really makes a big difference too. So those are some of the things that we've been, working on and talking about. Again, if we were to move in the direction of an advisory period at some point, that might be something that could be infused into that as well. It's tough to find time in the day.
Right.
To find time in the day, and that's kind of the cyclical issue that I think kids and adults deal with, is that we can't find a way to breathe. We keep
That's why I
trying
don't go to the
remind-
gym. It's my consummate excuse.
Anybody else?
I just had one quick question. How is it, so if a student goes through restorative justice, and I made me think of it when the mom said that her daughter was a senior now. Is that noted anywhere in their transcript? Does it affect anything as far as college applications,
No.
hurting them or anything like that?
No, if a student engages in youth court, it is not reported as a suspension. In cases where there's a hybrid, there would be a suspension on the record. That record stays with us. And in fact, there's, on the common application, there are 3 choices for the school to report on. We do not report whether or not students have ever been suspended. That's the 3rd box that says, my school doesn't report that information. And I've told parents before, my job is to try to get your kid into school. It's not something for us to share.
Well, in fact, if they participate in youth court, though, as a jury member, they can put it down as an extracurricular.
Absolutely. And it's actually a resume builder. It's true.
And some of the localized applications don't have this, but the common app, we were just looking at it, there's a yes, there's a no, and there is a school does not report. And for every child, it used to be just the student would have to check off that box. Now it's up to the school district to do it, and the checkbox is school does not report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much
Ms.
for all the
Brenda.
time and
Great job.
effort you
Thank
put
you.
into implementing this program.
I want to give a big shout out to Mr. Smith also,
Right.
because he has been instrumental in making sure that this program actually works. Could not do it without him.
Thank you to both of you.
I will say that the session at LAASCD was packed, and they are still hearing from districts who are interested in our experiences, because this is something that every district should be looking into at some point.
All right, that brings us to our final item for discussion and action, and that is the superintendent's action plan for 2018 and 2019.
Barry just whispered in my ear, this better be less than 2 minutes. I'll make it less than 30 seconds. The goal.
That's my girl, Barry. That's my vice president.
So this is completely, that night you're making me take time here. It is completely aligned with the board goals, which hasn't been 100% in the past. 9 board goals, 9 goals of mine, as well as action step items to follow. And it does include, restorative practices are mentioned in there. We've spent a lot of time in recent years on equity, and we're now moving toward cultural proficiency, and there's a lot of really interesting and I think valuable things that we're doing that are incorporated there, but this does not require board adoption. I leave it, it does not have to be reviewed tonight if you haven't looked at it yet. If you have any suggestions, it's a living and breathing document. Please take a look, and I'll take any feedback that you have.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions at the moment or comments?
A minute, 45 seconds, thank you.
And that included your introduction, so subtract that.
You just lost 15 seconds there.
All right, well, thank you for sharing this with us. I did look
My
at it, and
pleasure.
it is aligned with our board goals. All right, my friends, that means we are moving on to Ms. McCoy.
It is upon recommendation from the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education approve CSE, CPSE submissions as delineated.
All right, we all received those. Can I get a motion?
Motion?
Okay, Barry in a second from Linda. Tom's making me laugh. It's almost time to go home. All those in favor? That is all of us. All right, Mr. Polanski.
I am recommending that the Board of Education approve personnel items on schedules 3, 5, 8, 10, 11, 13, 15, 16, 17, and 22.
That was his other 15 seconds. All right, could I get a motion? Christine and a second from Xavier. All those in favor? That's done too. All right, and Dr. Acker.
Okay, it is upon recommendation from the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education approve items I through P on this evening's business agenda.
Excellent, we have all of those. Can I get a motion, please?
Motion?
Barry and a second. Christine. All right, any questions, comments? All those in favor? Everybody, thank you. That brings us to our second and final public commentary section. Would any of the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12 of you like to say anything?
And one that's asleep?
One that's asleep. No, we would never think that, actually. But I give her points for making it all the way through.
She begged me to come with me tonight.
Oh, I'm sure she's sorry about that now.
I wasn't sure I wanted to say anything tonight at all. I just wanted to come here and meet and
Oh,
listen.
yeah, I'm sorry. Let me just interrupt you for a second. Could you just state your name and
Of course.
affiliation with the district?
Sure. My name is Dr. Duke. I am a parent, a brief former employee. I used to work for the marching band years ago. So I know exactly what going to Syracuse is. I've been up there with the district before years ago. I now have 2 children in 2nd and 3rd grade. I live here in Huntington. I moved here because I used to work here and love the district and, look for a place for my children to settle. I've worked all over. I'm a teacher. I don't teach here, but I've taught in surrounding districts in California, in other places. And I'm here because I think over the last 3 years, I've been facing the district with their policies in regards to allergies and 504s. And the policies that are set up here have been very shocking to me along the way. Starting in kindergarten when my son, excuse me, I have the same contagious cough. As he started going on field trips and there was no plan set up for him to take his medications with him on the trip. That was from day 1 kindergarten. That year I started speaking to the principal about getting 504 plans going. Along the way I've been having stall tactics and different things, and I felt almost bullied by the district, or maybe stalled, told I needed forms and documents to get different things for him to support him along the way that was recommended by my medical professionals. And then being very patient, knowing what it's like to be on the other side, I've gone to the classroom teacher, to the teacher each time, to the principal, to the board, to requesting steps, trying to follow your procedures, reading documents. And over the last few weeks, I've walked into meetings where blindsided by a district lawyer showed up, blindsided by a doctor outside of the district was contracted by, who works for OSHA and major companies trying to combat my
Stop
stuff.
you there because it sounds like it's a very specific case to
Right, so I
yours.
don't want to be that person right now that's telling the whole story, but I guess in coming here, I'm trying to ask for, one, I just wanted to meet you tonight, but maybe in your discussions to look at the policies, to see that they're set up as other districts have, are very specific guidelines and procedures and state things going forward. I've requested like impartial hearings to go further to look specifics.
This is information that can't be shared, and there is a lot more to this situation than you're presenting. And I will tell you that in terms of policy, there are policies that are designed to be not as specific as the regulations that go along with them. So while I appreciate what you're presenting right now, I understand that this relates to a very specific situation that you're unhappy with, but there is multiple sides to this situation, and you and I have not had a conversation either. So you've spoken with other people. We have not. If you have a concern about policy, that should be a conversation that you have with me. And that
Okay,
has not been
so
held.
I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm asking that they be looked at and just, because I would rather come here and talk about other things that you're discussing rather than something like that.
If you have suggestions, I will strongly suggest that you, based on your experience as a parent, and I have children with allergies myself, I would appreciate it if you would delineate some of the concerns that you have and also some of the suggestions you might have for the policy, because most of our policies, if not all of them, are aligned very specifically with either a federal, state, or local law as well as a state regulation. So these are not policies that we draw up from scratch. They are policies that are often in somewhat of a template fashion that we adjust based on the needs of the students in the district. But if you have suggestions, and I mean this sincerely, I am all ears. But we can't get into the specifics of the situation that
I
you're
do not want to
addressing.
get into any specifics. I just wanted to meet everybody and know that this is a topic, not just for me specifically, that should be touched on as a district. I'd be happy to sit with, and I've suggested that along the way, as far as policy for the district. I think specifically that will come hopefully between you and I or whoever is next. I know we've spoken
We
a
actually,
couple
and
times.
this is I know this is
Yep, no, I
we're
was
running out
gonna
of time
say,
for this,
Brad.
but we have, we're going to address our wellness committee procedures first, and following that, I have spoken with a number of parents about bringing we have an allergy policy that also has the propensity to bring back people to the table to talk about a committee per se. I hate to use the term committee because sometimes committees go nowhere, but to sit down and provide anecdotal experiences that might contribute to an updated policy moving forward. It is not an antiquated policy. It is relatively new in its construction, and there is a lot of good information in there and good practice in there. And like I said, there are regulations that go along with it. I'm not sure if you've seen those. Maybe good
I've
for you to
researched
look at.
everything that I can as far as current policy. I feel like some of it we've paved along the way as we've gone compared to other districts.
Like I said, if you have a model
we-
policy, you can share it.
We can talk about that privately. I just think it's a topic that needs to be addressed.
Sure.
And, you know, we can discuss privately my own case, but I think in general, it is a topic of discussion that needs to be looked at. And I think that there are many children that aren't willing to stand up and discuss. I requested to be a part of that committee on my own building and was never responded to. So it's just something that I wanted to say that I think is important for a lot of children's safety, along with all of the other safety things that are going on that are super important for the health for many of the children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you
it.
so much. Have a great night.
Thank you for coming out.
coming, and thank you for stepping up to the mic. All right, is there anybody else? Okay, that brings us to our final closing comments by board members. Did anybody have anything to say?
I just didn't know if Jim wanted to mention any of the retirements that were on the, or not tonight.
We're going to have a separate
Okay.
Oh, the retirements
night
that
to do
were-
that, but I think that would be,
Okay.
there's going to be more coming, so rather do it all at once as opposed to
Alrighty.
piecemeal. But thank you, Christine.
I just didn't want you to, in 5 minutes, go,
No, that was nice, though, thank you.
Done that before, thank you.
That's
Happy
good.
Thanksgiving to everyone.
All right, and a
since we
happy
won't be
Thanksgiving
together.
to everyone. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Tom, in a second. Oh, Barry, all in favor? All right, thank you all very much. Get home safely.